Hello world, my name is Stijn Tole and I'm ESA's research doctor here at Concordia Station in Antarctica, and I'll talk with you a bit more about how it is to live in isolation here. So Concordia Station is one of the 3 stations in the middle of the Antarctic ice sheet operating year-round for science. For a 9-month period within this year, it's not possible for any transport to get in or go out of the station because of the extreme conditions outside. So I arrived here 5 months ago as part of a 12-member crew to stay for this winter period to maintain the station and continue with science. The main goal of my mission is to implement biomedical research experiments on myself and on the crew. And these experiments have been selected by ESA to learn more about how this environment can be a risk to our body and our mind. You can imagine if we want to plan for future manned missions to the Moon or to Mars, it's important that we understand these risks better. Because if we go to space, we have to deal with all kinds of stressors. Deviations from the normal situations, you could say, that ask our body and mind to adapt. And this can have quite some consequences for our health and also for our performance. Think for example about bone and muscle loss, if there's a lack of gravity, or space radiation if we go further into space. It can have serious long-term consequences as well. But also not being able to just go back home if you want to. Being isolated and confined in a small crew and not being able to go outside because the conditions outside are too hostile. This is where Concordia is interesting. So Concordia is quite such an environment. Here we live with 12 people for 9 months without any possibility of rescue. And we are at altitude, so there's less oxygen to breathe in the air. And outside temperatures can go as low as minus 80 degrees at one point, and there will be a time period of 3 months without any sunlight. So in that sense, Concordia classifies as we call it, isolated, confined and extreme environment, which has many similarities with space. It looks a little bit like living in a future space habitat. So the experiments that we're going to perform this year here look into changes in blood volume, changes in our immune system and in our gut bacteria, and how they can impact our health. But also we look at eating behavior, sexual feelings and well-being, and mindfulness, which can maybe be helpful to help us adjust to a strange environment like this. So prolonged isolation can have a psychological effect on us if we fail to fully adjust to this new environment. And you can imagine that's not so easy. It has been described in people that overwinter in Antarctica that they can develop symptoms of tiredness or headaches or sleep problems or problems with attention and memory. But also you may start to feel depressed or more anxious or angry, and there may be conflict between people in the base or even with people back at home. Usually you see that these kind of symptoms are more present during the harsher middle of the winter when the stressors are higher. But if we then talk about long-term effects, you also see when the stresses get lower, when for example the sun comes back, the symptoms get less as well. So we call it therefore the winter over syndrome. But most important, I think, is that overcoming and sharing these challenges together of overwintering in Antarctica can also come with a sense of accomplishment. And you see that people going to Antarctica often see this experience as a very important one in their life. It can come with more self-esteem, we may become better in solving problems and even feel closer together and get a better understanding of each other. And to me, this is the reason that I came here, because I think this is a very valuable experience. Living in isolation, personally, I think it can be helpful to try to create an environment that is a little bit more like at home. So for example, here I try to maintain a daily rhythm that mimics the day and night, even if there's no sun outside. And I try to stimulate my body with exercise, even if it's not possible to go outside and do my favorite sports. I also try to keep eating healthy with the idea that all these stressors is something our body needs to deal with and it could use some good food. Staying in touch with the people at home, with my family and friends, for me it helps a lot. And sometimes I actually do go outside, for example when I've collected samples, such as stool samples, saliva samples, blood samples, and these samples need to be stored cold, so lucky for me that I've got a big freezer outside. But more important maybe is also to understand that even though this is a new environment, it doesn't necessarily need to be an unpleasant one. I try to focus on things that I can enjoy myself with during my time here, such as new hobbies, and I might set new goals. And then if we are living with other people, especially if those people are not the ones you choose to live with, Like here, I think it's important to be very tolerant as much as you can. And it's not always easy, especially when the stresses are high. We tend to think first about ourselves. But to look into the perspective of the other person, I think here is very important.